Did you know that the Pakistani poet and revolutionary Faiz Ahmed Faiz spent a lot of time in Beirut, and he actually wrote about what he experienced there? And it reminds me a lot of what's happening now, and I think it's really relevant, so let's talk about it. If you don't know who Faiz Ahmed Faiz was, he was one of the most revolutionary poets and thinkers of his time, and he actually spent a lot of time in prison and wrote about the corruption and injustices that he saw in his country. One of his most famous poems that's been turned into a pretty famous song is Mujhse pehli si mohabbat mere mehboob na maang, which roughly translates to "My beloved, don't ask me for a love like the first one." Now, this poem might seem like a love poem, but it's actually a commentary on the corruption and injustice in society that Faiz saw around him. So how did Faiz end up in Beirut? We're gonna have to rewind all the way back to Pakistan in 1977 when General Zia-ul-Haq took over Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's place through the use of a military coup. This would soon lead to a decade of American-supported military rule. And this is when 67-year-old Faiz Ahmed Faiz decided to leave his home in Karachi and head to Beirut. Now, Faiz was an outspoken socialist, an associate of Bhutto's, and also a former political prisoner. And at this time, Beirut was actually the center of a lot of academic and intellectual discourse. Him and his wife surrounded themselves with Palestinian revolutionaries and had a lot of the same ideas and conversations about liberation and justice that still reign true to this day. There are photos of Faiz with people that you likely would recognize, like Yasser Arafat, Edward Said, and Iqbal Ahmed. In fact, in this book that's a series of interviews with Iqbal Ahmed, he actually talks about his interaction with Faiz. Faiz would do bilingual readings in Lebanon, and a lot of Americans who knew nothing of Urdu poetry would have tears in their eyes. In 1982, Faiz and his wife were actually forced to flee Beirut because of a full-fledged Israeli invasion. And it was in that year that Faiz wrote the poem Ek Nagma Karbala-e-Beirut ke Liye, which translates to a song for the beloved battlefield of Beirut. I can roughly translate what the poem says. He basically says that Beirut is the ornament of the world, Beirut is exquisite as paradise's gardens, and these shattered mirrors were once the smiling eyes of children. In the poem, he talks about how there are faces decorated with blood, but still dazzling beyond beauty. I'm not going to translate the whole poem, but I really recommend you go and read it. I think about him a lot when I learned about partition and a lot of other social issues and things that are happening in the world.
जाने शोरीदा काफी नहीं जाने शोरीदा काफी नहीं तो मत इश्क पोशीदा काफी नहीं आज बाजार में पाबजौला चलो आज बाजार में पाबजौला चलो दस्त अफशां चलो मस्त रक्सां चलो खाक बरसर चलो खून बदामा चलो खाक बरसर चलो खून बदामा चलो राह तकता है सब शहर जाना चलो राह तकता है सब शहर जाना